Hello, 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 everyone. How's everyone enjoying the plague? I'm just hanging out here at my place. Anywho, let's just jump right into it. Why video games do not, in fact, cause violence. Setting up screen share here, and here we go. Um, here we go. 2019 was a terrible year for mass shootings. There were a lot of them, including the one in Las Vegas, the one in Florida, the one in Texas. Terrible things. And naturally, when things like that happen, people immediately start looking for a cause. Most people start looking for something not politically charged, not racially or ethnic. So, what's the most harmless thing we can blame this terrible violence on? Let's blame video games, because everyone plays video games and video games have guns in them. Let's blame them. Well, that idea isn't exactly correct. Problem with that idea, it's a great theory, but there's no evidence to back it. And they've been researching it. People have been trying to find evidence to back this idea. For instance, in Illinois State University last year, students were invited to write a 15-page essay on their opinions on abortion. They then were allowed to play a copy of Doom 2 that was modded differently for each student. Some were more violent than others. Some were much less violent than others. After this, they had to defend their stance on abortion from a peer review that wasn't actually a peer review, but was written by a psychologist that was tailor-made to make them as enraged as possible. And the results? Nothing! The experiment was proved too inconclusive to state as definitive. There was no definitive correlation between the mod of Doom that they were playing, how violent it was, and how angry they got. There was normally what it should have been is if they were playing a more violent version, they would have gotten more angry. If they're playing a less violent version, they would have gotten less angry, but it was all over the place. So the experiments are a no-show, and at best, the only results show some minor correlation between gaming and violence. As New York Times says, none of it is conclusive enough to be cited as evidence of a theory. Oh, that experiment, by the way, you can find it in an article online, Psychological Science magazine, I believe. Scientist who actually worked on that experiment, Chris Ferguson, said, the data on bananas causing suicide is about as conclusive. The numbers work out the same. Another problem that makes this theory, or scapegoat as I like to call it, very, very difficult to prove is video games are extremely ubiquitous. They're everywhere. According to a statistic by CNBC, over 70% of high school students play video games. Of that 70%, 20% of school shooters were involved in the same games. For instance, the Columbine shooters, this is a classic example, they played Doom, the original, and Doom 2. The problem is, so did everyone else. It was huge. It was the Fortnite of that day. So you can't really point that, because think of that in terms of today. Everyone, okay, not everyone, but a lot of people play Fortnite. But if a person who plays Fortnite does X, does that mean X is caused by Fortnite? That is actually I'm drawing a blank. Give me a moment here. A logical fallacy. Thank you. Okay, a little confused. But the logic doesn't hold up. Okay, you can see this in examples. Other countries play more video games than the USA, and their rates of violence are drastically lower. Esports is massive in countries like China and Korea. Japan actually has one of the lowest gun violence rates in the world. And that includes Switzerland, which actually surprisingly is really up there. But if it's a definitive if-then statement, then if video games were a cause of violence, then we could clearly expect to see the same results overseas where gaming is higher. That's not the case. So in conclusion, no evidence can be found to support these claims. The studies can't support it, and video games are too ubiquitous to be blamed for anything. It's not just a simple problem, it's a national problem. And to be perfectly frank, blaming video games for it, it's kind of a cop-out. It doesn't work like that. So only through actually looking into the problem will we be able to find the true source. But until science says otherwise, video games are not to blame. for the violence in this nation. Thank you for your time, and now I just need to figure out how to get this on YouTube and upload it. Also, like, share, and subscribe. I'm kidding, this is the only video on my channel.